I'm not scared by what Graham spoke about because I employ a load of Y Generation. I basically deal with Y Generation with Yo Sushi. Small business, we turn over 85 million. We basically operate at 75 restaurants in the UK and 20 overseas. This panel is a really interesting panel because we'll use technology, but it's all really about the guest. I hate the word customer, so this is all about the guest. And it's reminding us about why we're all in this room. It's about delivering amazing food, amazing service. So we're just trying to get back to the core roots of why we're actually in business. There are two fantastic operators, one of which I can see, and the other one hopefully somewhere in the audience. Andrew Guy, who's you're going to come and join us on stage so I can get everybody on up here. Andrew is the CEO of Ed's Diner, a veteran of the restaurant world and a godfather to many people in the restaurant world. Has taught us everything. Ian Payne, is Ian Payne in the room? Please do come up. Ian Payne is the chairman of Stonegate, is also another veteran who understands the pub restaurant sector and pub business like nobody else, and again has terrific experience and will help us on that way. And then we have a couple of people who are going to help us in terms of some of the insights that they can give to us from Nestle. Neil, if you're here. Yep, please do come up. Neil will be kicking off, talking a little about some bespoke research which Nestle have done for us, which hopefully will get our juices going this afternoon. Gary Topple. Gary, will you join us please from Pathica? This gentleman basically runs probably the most used customer feedback portal, and I'm sure he's got an awful lot of insights, not just in this country, but internationally, about how to actually track extraordinary customer behaviour, particularly around guest recommend. And then Roger Perrone is used by many of us in the casual dining sector as the guru on where your brand is in terms of advocacy and in terms of brand reputation. So I'm pretty sure we're covered on most of our bases here. And the last gentleman's over here from Amex, and please do come up. We haven't met yet, so apologies for that, Mark. Mark is going to share some of the insights from Amex as well. So I know between this group, it's a large group, they're going to do quite a bit of talking, but I'm asking them to build on each other's comments and see if we can get a bit of debate going on. Equally, I would love it if some people ask some questions. It'd be nice to get some bit of conversation going with the audience. So I'll try and make sure that happens as well. So if I can start and I'll sit down. Neil, if you could perhaps share some of the insights through the Nestle research you've done on the eating out market, yeah. I think that'll kick us off nicely.
Yeah, perfect. Before I do that, I just want to comment very, very quickly on Graham Codrington's elements around digital and how we build that. And it's just, I'll throw it out there really as a potential gift. You might already be doing it, but within Nestle, we actually have worked with Tomorrow Today around how do we reverse mental around digital understanding and how it applies both to the business in terms of staff and how we work in the business, but also beyond it. And we now have a digital mentoring program where people who are 21, 22, and in fact some cases younger, are mentoring chief execs, MDs within the business. So I'll throw it out there. It's been incredibly successful. So if you want to build on that, then please shout and I'll share anything I can. Coming back to the purpose, we heard this morning a lot about the massive innovation within the restaurant sector, just the sheer level of choice that's out there. And we partnered recently with the BHA and CGA Peach on trying to understand particularly what drives first-time users to a particular brand or to a particular restaurant or pub restaurant. It's a broad sector of the industry. We actually spoke to just over 800 people. And the first thing that came to us in terms of the insight was actually that what you can't just say is that first-time users are first-time users. We've actually broken it down and understood the nuances that are in there. 48% of first-time users actually sit within the 18 to 34-year-old bracket. And a little bit linked to Graham's point, 75% of first-time users are using social media on a daily basis, and in a number of cases on numerous bases. So you have this big cross-section between a relatively young proportion of people who are first-time users and very, very active in social media. So the first, I guess, big point there was that from a far marketing perspective, how are you engaging with them? When we actually looked at the reasons for going to a restaurant for the first time, there were three key factors. One, which doesn't come as a surprise to anybody, which is location. 36% of people actually choose a venue on its location and its proximity to them. That really explains the space race that we've got going on that was discussed earlier this morning with a number of the private equity houses. Close by to that, which we found particularly interesting, actually was knowledge. Nearly 30% of people are either choosing or not choosing to go to a place for the first time based on their understanding of what that business actually stands for. Who are they trying to target and why are they relevant to me? Why would I understand them? And that typically is being picked up from two places. One is word of mouth, and also then when they're walking and being around the environment, what do they see when they're actually looking for somewhere to dine? And the third area was around preference. What are my preferences, and therefore why would I choose to actually go to a particular brand or to a particular format? So what the kind of big aha moment from our perspective when we're looking at working with customers and how they then work with their consumers is, yes, location is something that is there and it's an investment decision, it's about capital, but actually very close to that is what actually do you stand for and who are you trying to target and do they understand what you're offering? And the one big element that came out, and I'll name them because they are so far out there in terms of their knowledge of what they stand for and therefore the followership that they have and their ability to attract first-time users is Nando's. Nando's have actually doubled their level of followership in a year. They have over 2 million Facebook fans and over 1 million people twittering or tweeting about them on a very regular basis. And they've managed to get this real focus on what do I stand for and what am I offering, and therefore ability to attract first-time users has been significant. So summarising briefly, location, perhaps a given, but not the only reason. Knowledge of actually are you understood by your potential target audience? Then thirdly, are you actually meeting the preferences? And the preferences, the top three that we found were the actual quality of food itself, how good is that? The actual variability of what the choices of that food, and thirdly, the ambiance that's created and the environment that's created around it. So that's the kind of the learning we've got to date.
That's just for first-time visitors?
That's all first-time visitors, purely about first-time visitors. And in a very crowded market, we felt that that's actually a fundamental question to answer.
Okay, well, that's a good kick-off. Ian, what's your views? You've got a number of different brands which you run. And would that chime with your experience as the most important things?
We've got 623 pubs, and our two biggest brands are Yates and Slug and Lettuce. I mean, the first thing to say is, well, what are we selling? Because, we sell food, we sell drink, and hopefully we sell hospitality. But our real product is a positive emotional response. If you don't walk out of one of our pubs feeling better than you did when you walked in, then we failed.
Yep.
We sell a legal drug, we sell reasonable food, and hopefully you've got a chance of meeting the boy or girl, whichever your inclination may be. So the question for us is, well, how do we measure that? Now, we used to use mystery guest. I have a real problem with mystery guest because I think the biggest problem with it is they're answering questions that you've already asked them. And actually, are they the questions that your guests really want answered? If you've got somebody going out there doing a mystery guest for you, you say, look at this or look at that, they might be completely the wrong questions. And we were spending a lot of money on mystery guest, and we decided that it wasn't actually getting us anywhere. So what we do now, we have this thing, I'm sorry to say the word customer, Robin, but we have this thing called Customer Dashboard. And for every one of our sites, we pull in information from three sources. So firstly, we have little feedback cards in the sites. The one in Slug and Lettuce is very imaginally called Let Us Know What You Think, LETTUCE. Somebody got paid to do that. Not a lot. So we get feedback from the actual forms that people fill in. Secondly, we have scanned all the social media sites, and anytime any one of our sites is mentioned, that then gets fed into that dashboard. And then thirdly, anybody that either emails us, people still do actually write to us using post, or telephones us, that gets put onto the site as well. So every one of our 623 sites has got its own customer dashboard that has the input from those three sources. And then when the area manager goes in to do a review, that is then part of the review that they sit down with that manager and look at that whole spectrum of feedback.
So moving into then how you look after your existing customers, what you're talking about now, can we open up to people who actually monitor this? I mean, and Gary, you're obviously would probably argue that that's probably there's other ways of doing this, but I mean, what's your experience in terms of monitoring guest behaviour?
Yeah, I think I would like to perhaps just link the two, because I think the really interesting thing about what we're saying, where about knowledge and those sorts of things are attracting first-time visitors. Actually, the really important thing about attracting first-time visitors is you then want them to become second-time visitors and third-time visitors. So you have to attract them for the right reason. And one of the things we saw a couple of years ago with the rise of a lot of use of vouchers is we're bringing people into the businesses for the wrong reasons, who are then having bad experiences and weren't coming back. So it's kind of a double whammy. You weren't making any money the first time, you certainly weren't getting them back the second time. So I think attracting them in for the right reasons and making those connections is really important. And then, once you've got them coming in and coming back, you have to really make sure that you understand what a great experience looks like, what a compelling experience looks like. And then I completely agree with Ian, you have to embrace your own internal feedback programs, but also bring all the feedback into one place. You can help each of those individual location managers, whether it's a pub or a restaurant or a hotel or whatever, understands how are we doing. And I guess the last thing I'd say is just then empower that local team. Because experiences are delivered in your pubs and restaurants and hotels, and it's delivered by those local teams, and we have to empower those teams to take ownership of it, to understand, okay, in my pub, in my restaurant, in my hotel, with my people and my customers, this is what we're going to do differently tomorrow in order to ensure that we deliver a great customer experience, guest experience.
But Ian was very provocatively saying, actually, I don't. If you're already if you're forcing the answers by basically pre-selecting the audience or giving you feedback, which is what a lot of systems work that way. Yeah. Are you getting a true read on who your guest experience? And I think maybe I'll pass on to Andrew. I mean, how honest can you be?
Well,
with yourself as much as anything else, because we can all pat ourselves on the back saying what a great job we're doing, but it keeps all these IT customers in busy. But
yeah, I've got that. We use both. We have we still kept our mystery shopper, but that's for a sort of housekeeping KPI list of questions which are preset. In our case, did the food arrive in 12 minutes? Did they check back? We all know those things. And those are tick boxes, and you score them. But that just ticks the boxes. It doesn't give the emotional experience. And so we actually use Empathica at all our diners. And that's where we're monitoring how people feel. And that we get responses, considerable number of responses back through that way. And then beyond that, we have a lot of communication with Ed's fan club, or Ed's Club as we call it, which this week passed 400,000 members online, and there's a lot of communication back and forth with them. They write to Ed at Ed's Easy Diner, which of course doesn't actually exist but comes to us, and we get a lot of communication and feedback on experience in that way. I'll just go back on one thing to say that we were asking about first-time users. Obviously we see a lot of those because we're going to open 12 diners this year and 15 next year, so there's a lot of first-timers. But we have a particularly great advantage that the whole world knows what to expect from a diner. They don't know how good it's going to be, but they've got a pretty good idea there's a cheeseburger and a Diet Coke. So first-time users will come in. It's for us then to match and meet and exceed their expectations. But in the kind of locations we always choose, which are high footfall, many of them shopping centres or railway stations, then in those cases, we're not marketing. The majority of people see us and just come in because they happen to be hungry at the point they see us.
Okay. And if I go back, Mark, I mean, you see zillions of credit card statements coming through and how people spend their money, when they spend it, and frequency and such like, and which venues they're spending it. What's happening out there in terms of people's behaviour? Say, over the last 5 years, which starts at a horrible place and should be at a reasonable place now in 2014.
Yeah.
Where are people spending their money? What sort of advice can you give us, this audience, about eating out?
So you're right, we do see, I wish it was zillions and zillions of transactions, but certainly millions of transactions coming through the Amex network every week. And obviously we do know where people are buying their groceries, where they're buying their clothes, where they're eating, where they're staying, and where they're going on holiday, which gives us huge richness of data. What I would say in the hospitality sector is it's coming back strongly for American Express card members. You know, when I go back to the end of 2008, 2009, we really saw some tough times for all of you, particularly in the corporate sector. People weren't travelling, the T&E budgets weren't out there. That now seems to be coming back. We're seeing good growth in corporate dining, particularly. London clearly is obviously streets ahead of elsewhere in the UK, which you'd all be aware of. But I think the analytics is interesting, and it's hugely valuable because it creates that data, that information for all of us to be able to go and contact our customers. And obviously my responsibility is to contact American Express customers to drive them to your establishments. But the one thing that was said earlier on is this emotional connection. And I think we sometimes lose the emotional connection through the maelstrom of analytics and big data that we've got. And I think as people that are trying to provide great service for whoever our customer is, we should never lose that emotional connection. And I'll give you, a great example. Just yesterday, I had my annual medical health check just around the corner, actually, and the doctor that was examining me said, when I told him who I work for, he said, I love American Express. And I said, well, tell me why. He said, every Christmas, it's a family tradition, we go to the theatre on Boxing Day. And my family wants to go and see the Book of Mormon. I could not get tickets for love nor money. I phoned your Platinum concierge. Their only questions to me were matinee or evening, stalls or circle, which row would you like to be in? And he said, that is the kind of service that I demand. Now, forget analytics. We didn't know he wanted to go and see the Book of Mormon. We didn't know that he was going to go on Boxing Day. It was just having the right response to that customer at that time that absolutely met his relevant needs. He is now an advocate for American Express, and that's the emotional connection. So analytics and transactions stories are hugely valuable, but we should never lose the fact that actually people are people, and there are different things that actually want to make them buy and make their purchasing decisions.
Question, great unashamed plug for Amex. Very impressive. I wish I could get mine as good as that. What I'm interested in, I guess, and I've done this for 30 years, and I know these gentlemen are a little bit ahead of me, maybe, but not much. The portfolio of brands that people use has changed, I suspect. I mean, Roger, we've spoken about this in the past. I mean, can you explain? Because you research the whole of the casual dining sector twice a year. You do virtually every known brand, and you've seen things change over 4 years. It's just that the portfolio of brands, and then how do you get your biggest slice of that cake as an operator?
Definitely. From doing a lot of research across 40 to 45 casual dining brands, in terms of things like advocacy, which you mentioned earlier, newness is a key aspect. The new brands that are exciting, that offer the millennial generation something new to tweet about, talk about, and so on, do tend to be very well rated in terms of things like Net Promoter Score. However, over time, what we've seen is it's a bit more complicated than just newness. It's certainly having a bit of soul as a brand. I think so many brands, particularly in the restaurant space, and through the 2000s in particular, slightly faked it. They rolled out a box to a box to a box to a box. There's whatever there is, 500 mid-sized towns in Britain, and that's what they aimed for. How quickly could we go and win this race to fill up the high street with our restaurants? Surprise, surprise, actually when the market got a bit more competitive, then some of the brands started falling by the wayside. And the ones that had a certain magic and soul, and often came down to an individual, your founder, Simon Woodruff, is a nice example. You were around when he was around then. You've got brands like Bills, completely non-tech Bills. It doesn't do any tweeting. It has a Facebook membership of 23 or something. Is a huge success. And then you've got the other end of the spectrum, another brand with soul, someone like Nando's that has 2 million users and 1.5 million Twitter followers and so on. So it isn't just a digital thing. It's actually having something that you believe in, that you can share with your people as a culture as well, and that really moves things on.
And then back to the variety of brands. How many brands can somebody cope with, the Y generation? Can they do
a
5?
lot?
Can they do
a lot.
10,
They're not loyal at all.
How promiscuous are they?
Yeah, typically in a year, the average customer, not just that generation, will go to 12 to 15 of the big chains.
Okay, in a year they'll do 12, 15
And the
brands.
biggest we saw share of wallet, which is of those 40 brands, the biggest we saw was 12%. Okay. So actually, there's a lot of space out there. Loyalty programs are almost non-existent yet. Really, you got Nando's again as the leader, but on that, in putting a digital loyalty program together that might actually increase that a bit.
Okay, well then, and then given you and Gary analyse data day in, day out on this space, how do you rank the key determinants of guest retention or basically satisfaction? What are the top three? You said the top three for attracting new customers. I mean, what analytically are you seeing in terms of the key qualities of a fantastic offer that people keep repeating visiting for?
In correlation terms, it's actually service. Everyone states it's food. Everyone says, oh, it's the food, it's the atmosphere, whatever. Actually, if you look at the correlations on most brands, it is actually the human dimension to it. Did you make it feel special? Was I special? Yeah. And if you made them feel special, then surprise, surprise, they will reward that. It's a natural human instinct and be advocates for you.
Would you agree with that? I mean,
yeah, I think so. One of the interesting things, one of the reasons I think we say food is often more than half of whether I think my food tastes great happens before I ever take a bite of food. So, it's about, have you got a great menu with things on there that I want to order? When I place that order, do they talk it up? That's a great choice. It's one of our favourite items. You're really going to enjoy that. Do I prepare the food in the right time frame? Do I come out? Does it look great on the plate? Am I anticipating that first bite? Does it smell great? This is all the things that build up to whether I think my food tastes great. So I think it is about our people. It is about the connections that they make, but sometimes consumers just kind of recall it in different ways. And I think because of all of that, really the biggest determinant of successful experiences is just the gap between what I expect when I walk in and what you actually deliver. And if it's a negative gap, you're in trouble. And if it's a positive gap, then you're building some loyalty. So when you look at first-time visitors, that's why kind of the reputation, social media recommendations is so important, because it's building my expectations. But then, is it the right expectation? So I think, we believe the experiences we deliver are now the messages. You can't disconnect your kind of marketing from your delivery. Those things have got to be absolutely joined up because they happen in real time. If customers have great experiences or bad experiences, they'll be talking about it in real time and making those recommendations and connections.
So who in casual dining is doing the best jobs?
As well as Sushi, obviously.
Absolutely brilliant. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here.
Yeah, so I think once again, kind of referring back to the kind of newer brands. Right. I think one of the reasons they do a great job is they also happen to be smaller brands. So they can kind of keep the essence of what's real. So
that's my next question: how do you scale and keep it special?
Yeah, and I think that's where I think Soul is a beautiful way of describing it, because you've got to live and breathe these things, and actually is where I think customer kind of conversations really come into play, because getting, as you grow, making sure you're getting feedback from all of your locations every day from customers. They can talk to you in their own words about what's going on. And you've got to take a view, actually, does that sound like the business that we want to be? So, allow your customers to be your coaches, to be your help, and make sure that as you scale, you're staying true to yourself.
Neil,
there's 2 points. One is to back up, when within the first time users, 50% actually will act on word of mouth and a recommendation. So that hasn't got to be through digital media. That can just be, it can be in any medium at all. So that is linked to, did I have a good experience? Part of that is food, part of that is service. So it's getting mixed up all in those 2 or 3 things. The thing that we have to be careful about, I think, generally, is we've talked a lot about Nando's and we've, perhaps some more contemporary businesses, but actually what we've found is that the age groupings are really important. So 18 to 34 do focus a little bit more into the Wagamamas, the Nando's, the Yo Sushis. I mean, that's a fact. But as you go up beyond that, actually you get the Carluccio's coming in, you get Brewers Fayre coming in, you get a broad cross-section of brands that are actually meeting very well the needs of the people that they're targeting, either whether they're male or female, or the age group that they're actually targeting. So I think we've just got to be focused on, there's a breadth here. It's not all about 18 to 34-year-olds. No. It's not all about new concepts. It's actually about a very established industry that when it does a good job at targeting a particular group, age, sex, and preferences, then they win and they become a brand in the consumer's eyes.
I think that's where the really good established brands, they have a very clear identity. Customers know what to expect when they walk in, and they're able to deliver it time and again. Yeah. So I think they are addressing that market, whereas some of the newer brands, the faster growing brands, are still creating that definition of who they are to their customers.
One thing is, more than half of restaurant customers are women, so we probably should have a few women on the panel.
Well, no, sorry.
I know your CEO is a woman.
I employ loads of women. My team are women.
Good
Um,
point.
I'm just conscious of the march of time. We've got about 5 minutes. I mean, you have got an extraordinarily experienced panel here. It'd be great to take at least a few questions from the audience. I can see Michael over there. Perhaps you could jump up and tell us who you are and shout away.
Michael Gottlieb, restaurateur. I was very interested in Dr. Codrington's talk, and I noticed that, as was mentioned before, most of you put away your phones and stopped looking at your tablets. And didn't that, in fact, completely wipe out his own argument for the importance of social media? And what I've heard today from the panel, and all of you guys up there, are saying we are a high-touch industry, and that is the most important thing in our business. The rest is a bolt-on bit that's important, but not quite as important as he made out. Do you agree with that?
I think this is the reason for being. I mean, happy teams and happy guests are kind of what I stood for from day one. And I'm pretty sure I can speak for Andrew and Ian. Everything else happens to be supporting those two goals. And we'll come on to happy teams next. And I'm with you. But you can't ignore technology because it's the communication
Well,
vehicle.
Bill's does, doesn't it?
Sorry?
Bill's does.
Yeah. Andrew.
It's interesting. Michael used the phrase just then, high touch, and that, I'm sure, calls back to a book that some of us of our age remember, and where an author called John Naisbitt wrote about high-tech, high touch. And his thesis in this book, which was called Megatrends, and I think it must be over 30 years ago, but his thesis then was that for the more technology comes in, the more you have to balance it with interpersonal relationships. And you know, to take an extreme, if a restaurant was to be 100% technology, then it's an automat. And automats, to be frank, other than buying a bar of chocolate, haven't been that successful. Comes to mind in Schiphol Airport, there's a machine where you can buy hot chips in a container, and there's nobody at that, but they're queuing at all the restaurants. Yeah. And I think that Michael's point about high touch is very important. The service element, which is the high touch part of our operation, is absolutely the number one thing. It is what I think all successful restaurants focus on. They talk about in different ways how they look. They recruit, how they train, and all the other things. But that's what they're really saying, is that it's people that matters more than anything.
Which sets the next session up beautifully.
Can I just touch on the Bill's comment? Because actually, if you take Bill's as an example, it actually doesn't ignore technology. It's one of the cleverest companies, one of the cleverest restaurant chains now using technology. What it doesn't do, it doesn't push out messages to anybody. It creates great service, great experiences, and allows other people to talk about Bill's. So you see it on TripAdvisor all the time. You see it tweeted in relative terms an enormous amount. So they've actually absolutely got it right. They allow other people, they allow their consumers and their customers and their guests to talk about them. They don't feel the need to actually go out and push messages out there. And I think sometimes with technology we get too obsessed about pushing stuff out to people that is not relevant to them, they don't want to hear, when actually if we stuck to lots of the things we do really well, people will start to talk about us, and that's what you see with the likes of Bill's. They've got it really down to a pat.
Yeah. Just another modern form of word of mouth, isn't it? Really?
Indeed, yeah.
Any other questions around here? We can take one more. Can't see anyone's there. Oh, here we go. Sorry, it's lady over here. Wonderful. And then we can close.
Hi. You mentioned Neil, right? About your research where people told you that ambience and atmosphere is actually really important to them. And what's the funny factor about that is that they told you that consciously, whereas most of the customer experience is actually extremely subconscious. All of the things like the lighting, the color, whether the person smiled to you, etc. It's all how subconsciously we make decisions as consumers. So my question in here is how much you as business owners of such an establishment are looking at the fact that such a little thing as bad color of the lamp that doesn't make any sense with your brand identity can have an influence on how the consumer perceives you as a brand and therefore what their experience is?
Ian, do you want to take that?
Well, we do it all the time in terms of trying to understand the subconscious response. If I could give you an example, 50 of our pubs are student pubs, which we bought from M&B, and it's a brand called Scream. It's big yellow signs, and they're virtually all on campuses. And when M&B designed them, they kind of designed them on a sort of Seattle grunge. So it was like Kurt Cobain was going to come out, and they were filthy and they are horrible, and all the staff smelt, and they wore shorts and everything, and studs and earrings and everything else. And unfortunately, they got 10 years out of time. And we had 50 of them, so we had a bit of a problem. So we had to reinvent them. And we spent a lot of time talking to students, doing exactly what you're saying, seeing what they wanted. And the technology bit's got an angle there, because one of the things they wanted was super fast Wi-Fi, plugs that they could charge their phones in everywhere, free printers. We put all these things in there. But interestingly, the things you're talking about lights and colour and everything else, we changed all of that by talking to students. We did quite a lot of work with the University of Bournemouth, which has got a very good marketing degree down there, and they're very bright students. And so you've got to do the research in terms of finding out that subconscious bit if you can before you do it. But at the end of the day, as we all know here, until you actually put it in place, you're never going to tell whether it works or not. I wouldn't be telling you this story if it hadn't worked. Of course, it's been a massive success. And we're rolling them out everywhere, yeah.
I think just to sum up, I mean, advice to the audience about looking after the guest going forward, not the history. We talked about the here and now, but just going rounds, what do you think we should be focusing on? Everyone here is running restaurants and pubs and clubs and hotels, and you've got some insights.
The millennial group of people, the next segment that is going to come along, will not judge their life on their assets or what they accumulate, but the experiences they have through their life. To my mind, it's all about the experience you give people.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Yeah.
I'm going to put that on its head slightly. I think it's a people business, and I have a real problem that most of the profits don't go to any of the frontline people. And I think more of a John Lewis style thinking. I know it's not going to be as exclusive as that. Yeah. For example, on my business, I give half the profits to its staff, all of them, as a bonus. Half go to me, so it's not so bad. And I think that sort of enlightened thinking, I think, is actually how you're going to get better frontline staff. If they're not, frankly, incentivized to care, they probably won't.
Right, perhaps the next group will tackle that one. And Andrew.
It's simple. Higher attitude, train skills, and promote and push to the fore the people who represent your culture, and quickly get rid of the people who don't.
Ian.
I can't improve on that.
It's good, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Yep.
Build the knowledge of the people that you want to come into your business.
And Gary?
I think, so technology I think is critical, but you've got to think about how to apply it to your brand and stay true to yourself. So don't try to become something you're not. We are people businesses, we are delivering experiences, but that doesn't mean we can ignore technology. We've still got to embrace it, but make sure it represents you at your best.
Yeah. And last of all, I spent a lot of time in the States the last couple of years, and I've got to say, we should be justly proud of what we've achieved the last 10, 20 years. We've come an awful long way. I sit on 4 boards, and a Pubco, Marston's just going through a big journey. Caffè Nero just opened its first site in Boston. Yo's about to open 3 sites later in October this year. And we've come an awful long way. I think we lead the way in some respects, and London is the most viciously competitive market in the world. I kid you not, and eating out. Most of the people who are operating the best restaurants are independent operators. So any insights or anything about focusing on the guest is what we need to do, obsessively. But you can't do it without happy teams. So on that note, passing to the next group, thank you for your time. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us today. Thank you.